All right, it's 6 o'clock, so let's kick off this business meeting of Urbana School District 116. Roll call, please.
Member Staton, Member Jones,
Here.
Member Hickson,
Here.
Member Baxley,
Here.
Member Langendorf here, Vice President Exum, President Pulowski.
Here. Are there any corrections or additions to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, it's now time for citizen statements. If anybody who's present would like to make a statement for the board, please fill out a goldenrod sheet in the back of the room and hand it to our recording secretary, Lori Johnson. Calling once, calling twice. No citizen statements this evening. There is a call for an executive session after tonight's meeting for two purposes. One is litigation facing the district, and another is personnel. The exact wordage of the exemptions are spelled out in the published agenda. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and doubly seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Our student ambassadors are sick or busy with student activities tonight, so let's move straight into board reports. Anybody have a board report they wish to give this evening? Go ahead, Sherry.
I had the opportunity to attend 4 different schools for NAPID Day last week. I started out at King's School, and they had coffee and donuts with parents and their children. I was surprisingly found a parent who was a friend of my daughter's, and now she is a parent of a 3rd grader at King's School, and I hope that she'll become more involved in district activities, so it was a nice way for me to connect one-on-one with a parent. Then I went to Leo School, where the kindergarten students were celebrating the 100 days of school, so I got to observe, or not participate, but observe in 3 different kindergarten classes to see how they did that and all the different activities that they did to celebrate 100 days of school. And I got to meet the principal, so I hope to have an appointment with him next week so I can talk to him one-on-one. And then I went to Dr. Williams. I saw another former student of mine, and I met another parent who has a young child in 1st grade, and we had a nice conversation about her experiences with her children and her family. And then I was off to early childhood for an assembly. And what was so nice is to see the Dr. Williams students perform a dance for the young children at early childhood. It's nice to see that connection. They're so close. They're right next door, and it's nice that they can participate in that educational program as well. And the only other thing I want to say, it's time for Read Across America. It's our 25th year. It's going to be on March 8th from 10 to 1 at Lincoln Square, and there'll be activities and free books for kids and a free tote bag, and I hope that we have 1,000 children who come. So looking forward to that. It's free.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to give a board report? All right, I do. Just to let the public know, we have a pair of seats that are going to remain unfilled after the next election. So I think we as a board need to discuss basically the timing of the process by which we start accepting applications and then subsequently do interviews and appointments, because the clock will start ticking on us basically the day we certify the election and bring in the new board members. And if we don't have a new member installed by, is it 45 days? I think it's 45 days, then the regional superintendent will do it for us. So, and we really just don't want to leave it open in general. So we can start, since we know which sub-districts are going to be open, we can start taking applications basically any time, but the new board would be the ones obviously doing the interviewing and all of that. So, which sub-districts is it again? It's subject. I know it's Torrey. I don't know the numbers. 1 and 6.
Yeah, so St. Wally's and Torrey.
So I'm guessing Catherine will have something up on our website that would allow the public to.
Yep, so this is the.
Well, that's from
This is
last
from
time.
last time, but
Yeah.
what we need to be able to put something up is, we were hoping you could give us dates of when you might want us, because this does have dates on it. So when we would want to collect the statement of interest forms. Last year we did early March, and then we had resumes and letters to our offices by the end of March. So people could pick up forms at the March 6th and then drop them off March 27th. So we could follow something similar to
Well,
that.
I mean,
or-
I think, though, it'd be the new board would be the same as the old board, I guess, wouldn't it? So-
Yeah, it would be. That's
So-
why we were thinking we didn't really need to wait.
There will be one new person.
Two.
Two.
There's gonna be two empty seats, because Sitlali,
No, but I mean, you said the new board will be the same as the old board, but there'll be.
no, what I mean is the 5 members who are,
Oh,
the 5 members who are doing the interviewing are already here. So yeah, Ben, Lola. me,
Nobody's
and
running
the two of you.
challenge, so there's no
Right,
challenger,
no,
so it,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so
yeah.
the outcome of the election won't matter because we know the outcome for those 2 sub-districts. Because no one else can run legally because,
The deadline's
the
long
deadlines
passed.
for filing, both as a write-in candidate and as a regular candidate, have long passed. So.
So,
Um,
yes, so that's why we thought, since we know who the 5 people are going to be that would be doing the interviews.
Yeah,
that
you're right, we could start
probably-
that anytime. So, I guess we could, the election is in April, we would typically be the first meeting in March, typically is when,
First meeting in May.
sorry,
Mhm.
is typically when the new board would be organized, and be right after that is when we would do the appointment. So,
So that's May 6th.
so I'm thinking interviews probably in April.
Yep,
right.
that's what we did last time. So what are you thinking? I mean, we can kind of look at these dates again and follow something really similar and have interest forms available like March 3rd. That's the first Monday in March.
That makes sense.
That's
to
next
me,
week.
yeah.
And then,
That's the week after next.
week after next, yes. And then and that gives us a little time to put it out there a little bit more. And then we could collect them through Friday, March 28th. If we wanted to, that gives people almost a whole month to get their statement of interest, resume, letter.
Why don't we, I mean, would it be better to close it on a Monday to give people the weekend to submit it electronically?
Sure.
Or
The
Sunday night.
31st?
Yeah, but we should make the deadline hard.
Yes, like
So,
4:30, when our office is closed, that's what we've been doing, is the
yeah,
end of the
let's
office
just,
day.
yeah, let's make a hard deadline on.
March 31st?
Yeah,
Okay. And then we will have pickup be Monday, March 3rd.
There's one thing that's been kind of confusing, even though our boundaries, our school boundaries have changed, our sub-districts are still the same as they were 2 years ago.
absolutely correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
those only change every 10 years after a census, and we're forced by election laws to redraw them.
So what we did last time is we had the statement of interest form, we had the policy, but then I thought we also had a map. Okay, yes, so there would be a map, so Torrey's area is the King neighborhood, and then Sitlali's area is.
It's
Brookings.
weird,
It's a
it
kinda really
stretches,
choppy-
it's
Yeah.
like literally
Yeah.
it's literally half a block from my house, is where it starts, and it winds its way all the way,
Over by Dr. Williams.
over by Dr. Williams,
By
and,
Brookings.
yeah, and then out by Savannah Green.
Yep,
And mine is King way out
and yours, yes,
past Cunningham and,
yes.
yeah.
So we'll have a map, so people will know exactly, and they can go online. So if you're not quite sure, our website also, you can go into the board page and you can click on the sub-districts, and if you click on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, it'll show you the boundaries by color. So that's something else okay.
Right, anything else, board reports? All right, moving on, our first administrative report tonight is our transportation overview.
So I think Mary Ann's gonna start, but while she's doing that, I shared with the board, a couple people that were here, that Jay Rank from MTD is here, one of the operating directors, and he has to run out to his daughter's performance at Central, which is very important. So we're gonna flip-flop the presentation, is that okay, Shawnee? Okay, and we're gonna talk about MTD first. So Jay, if you want to hop on over. I'm going to turn it over to Mary Ann. No, Mary Ann's presenting. Jay's just there for questions.
Microphone's on.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Yeah, Jay, thank you for showing up tonight. Hopefully this will be pretty quick. So we are just going to kind of give a quick transportation overview of some information that we've been asked to present on tonight. The first thing that I wanted to go over was the contracts. And for first student, we have a 3-year contract. It's going to be going back out to bid in February of 2027. And with MTD, we have an annual contract. So I just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of the financial piece and some background knowledge on that. And then we were going to go over some of the behavior incidents. And this, we got this nice graph from MTD. It was really helpful to kind of see the different things that they take data on. So I took it from August 2023 through December 2024. So if it's red, those were fights that MTD counted, and then an incident would be any kind of other behavior type of incident that wasn't a fight. And then to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, transport student would be, if you notice, you'll see a lot of that in like August. That is if like a student is needing to be transported to another bus, like they got onto the wrong bus. So you see that a little bit more often in the beginning of the year. And then counsel was more of just having conversation with a student, kind of, that could be telling a student which route to take. It's more of just having conversations, not necessarily like behavior counseling. And then any time that the district requests a video, and then if there were multiple incidents. So if you also look at last year's trajectory to where we are so far to December, you can see that a lot of the incidents have decreased, especially the fights. And there seems to be, on the next slide, we kind of go over that process too. So anytime that there is an incident, the school administrator will reach out to MTD, request the video, and then the school is the one who handles the discipline, and the administrator follows the district's student behavior response continuum. And then we also, if there's like something major that we need to continue to communicate with MTD, they've been really great at giving us any information that we request or kind of working with us. We have a good working relationship with MTD on this. One thing that we kind of hit on too is that there's an MTD supervisor that helps over at the middle school, especially. They make sure that the buses are getting there on time. They're there to assist the operators and what we would call a driver or operator to release those buses at dismissal time to make sure everybody gets on and in and out of the buses safely.
Can I say one thing, Mary Ann?
Sure.
I was going to give context before we started as to why we're talking about behavior and discipline. So at the end of the year, we always ask our board members, what topics would you like to have us bring to you for the next year? We do that in June. We do it again in August. And this was a topic that was brought to administration and wanting to hear more specifically about student behavior on the buses, yellow buses and MTD buses, and how we address those. So I meant to say that when we invited Jay up. So we're not just kind of randomly talking about behavior. This was a request from the board to hear, because board members do hear from parents when there are issues, and so they wanted to know how we're addressing those things. So, sorry, I meant to say that at the
Oh,
beginning.
thank you.
Mary Ann, did you say on the chart what each line
Can you go back to
represented,
it?
like number-wise?
I don't think that it had numbers with it,
Okay.
but if we want, I can get that for you. I can get that
Okay.
data. I'm going to take a note of it though, so I don't forget. Okay.
Yep.
And then can you go to, yep. So with the sixth grade center, we've had a lot of conversation of how to make sure the fifth graders know what to expect when they go to the sixth grade center. So a lot of the conversation has been working with MTD so we can talk about their expectations along with ours, and making sure that those fifth graders really know, because it's going to be new for them. It's not the yellow school bus. It's going to look a lot different for them. So there is going to be a sixth grade orientation on Thursday, March 6th from 6 to 7. And we're working with MTD and with Quest, and we're also inviting First Student to be there as well to kind of help prepare some of the families so they know what to expect. We are looking at some route changes to address with the ridership needs. We're going to be adding a green bus, which will lower those students on that current route, and then splitting up the orange and gold to kind of help with some of those behavioral concerns. And then if you click on that link, there's also it's the MTD website, and it kind of shows you which routes and neighborhood maps, and it was a really good resource that we wanted families to be aware of so they can kind of look to see more about the Learn to Ride program, any kind of questions that they might have about their routes. And that is
Oh, I was going to
kind of-
say, and then
yeah,
MTD does a really good job of, while they do also have this information on the website, they give us a one-pager kind of routing, I guess, kind of route around for each bus, and then we are able to electronically, they send it to us electronically, and we're able to give those out. So we may not have those for the March 6th meeting, but in the fall, we will have those at registration and things like that. So we'll be able to give those to parents so they know exactly kind of where the bus is going and what streets to go stand on. And so that one pager with the route kind of mapped out is really, really handy for families too, so.
Yeah, we'll update that when we
Yep.
determine the exact routing of the buses for each school in each neighborhood. But yeah, you can see on our website, I think the link shows the Urbana High School section, but yeah, there's one for the middle school as well. So basically, either you can click on it and get like a interactive like Google map that shows the routing, or we have like a PDF that you can download as well that you could print out. You know, we bring those to the schools.
the next part is going to be on First Student. So do you have any questions for Jay?
How many students do we have riding MTD?
Oh, that's a great question. We don't know the, the individuals. We just count numbers. But probably, I don't know, 100 kids a day, something like that. I could verify that, and
Oh, it's more than that.
more than that, yeah. Now that I say that.
I can look a little bit further into that too. Sometimes it's hard to differentiate between MTD and First Student.
Yeah, sorry.
I think assigned in Skyward, it's 25, 27
That could
who are
ride
assigned to buses who could ride.
in both buildings, you mean, right? Yeah. That would basically be everybody, John.
Yeah, I was gonna
25,
say.
27.
Sorry,
That-
11:45.
I was gonna say,
That-
that's a really
that-
big number.
That sounds more.
11:45 sounds right, about right, yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Good luck at the concert.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, thank
Thanks,
you.
Jay.
So it was my understanding that First Student or First Consulting was brought in last year and did a presentation for the board. And so it was kind of like, what were some of the scenarios that you guys were told, and what are some of the actuals? So we're going to try to kind of summarize that for you a little bit. My understanding is from the presentation that for school year 23-24, that they were they had like 39 different runs, and they were anticipating through scenario A, that first scenario A is AM, and then that second scenario A is PM, so that there would be 39 runs for 24-25 in the morning and 37 in PM for 24-25. And if you look at the actual, we are right on target with that, with 39 AM runs and 37 PM runs. So, and then it breaks it down a little bit by school and regular buses and special needs buses. And then we got some data, but then we wanted to make sure that it made a little bit more sense with the Skyward data. So the presentation you guys had was a little bit off, but we wanted to make sure that we pulled it exactly from Skyward and that it matched. So those two asterisks were updated to have like about 55 eligible riders last year. And this year there's 1765, and there were fewer preschool students that were eligible last year, and there was a growth in our special needs population as well. We went from 33 routes to 34, and 38 drivers to 36. There was attrition of 8 drivers over the summer, but first student was able to get 6 new hires, which is good. And then for behavior incidents from first student, for school year 24, there were 505 referrals from August 23 to January 24. And so far this year, for the same time frame, we're down to 228 referrals. And some of the comments that I received from first student, and if you want to ask them questions, feel free to interject. We're seeing about a 55% referral reduction. And Yankee Ridge has had a 99% referral reduction. Thomas Paine's had about a 12% increase. And first student commented that they do feel a lot more support from administration in 25 school year, which is good. And the incident process is pretty similar with MTD, but I would say that we're probably in a more communication with Shawnee. So if the bus drivers for first student actually write referrals and give it to first student manager, which is Shawnee, and then she emails it to the school administration and then copies the business office, so we're aware of the incident that happened. And the school administrators, they handle any kind of discipline adhering to the district student behavior response continuum. And then if there happens to be like an actual bus suspension or something that needs to be escalated, then that's communicated with first student as well. And first student, this was recommended, and I think that there was a pilot last year, but they are recommending that we take another look at first acts, which is student ridership conduct tracking. So this is a newer conversation that we've started in the last couple of weeks of kind of being able to monitor that a little bit better. And that's all that we have so far for first student.
So, one question I have is, I mean, one of the things we do, especially at the middle school and high school level, is we have, student handbook training. We go over it, and then as from a building perspective, as part of that, I mean, do we also go on it with expected behavior, conduct of behavior on buses?
So as part of the registration process, we have a bus expectation one-pager. So parents are, when they register, they're supposed to kind of sign off that, yes, I've read these, and yes, I'll go over them with my student. But then what we used to do is you mean for all the elementary kids too?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
everybody. I mean,
Yeah.
let's be,
Yep.
transparent about expectations.
So for elementary, we have these matrices that are kind of for the whole building. And the bus is one of the areas that we talk about. So they talk about what being respectful, being responsible, being safe looks like in the restroom, in the hallway, in the lunchroom. And bus is one of those locations. So they always have a part of one of their posters is what the bus expectations are, like You know, what does it look like to be responsible on the bus? We stay in our seats. We also, by law, are required to do bus evacuation drills twice a year, and so that's where we really hit the elementary kids with the expectations for staying in your seat while the bus is moving, and, you know, for food and hands to self and things like that for the elementary. For the older kids, we have always done that on those, you know, we, for the last few years, had a 6th grade day and a 9th grade day, and those were the days where we talked about expectations for MTD and for Yellow Bus. But now, since the 6th grade center, 6th graders will be by themselves, we'll do it
Sure.
with them. And then we'll probably do the same thing with 7th and 8th grade separately, and then the 9th graders will come on their own day and have like their freshman day. And then they do the same thing with them, going through the handbook, kind of the planner, and talking about the expectations.
And I know that from
Yeah.
some principal emails back and forth, there are times where they mention reviewing bus expectations, maybe with like a certain bus if if they see continued issues.
Thank you. Sherry?
Two of the unknowns that we were concerned about last spring was with all these buses going from all over the community to Yankee Ridge, how has that worked out? And what about the students who were in Yankee Ridge and now are being bused to another school? How has that transitioned been? So those are two areas that I think we'd like some follow-up on.
Is it on, Chris? Make sure it's yellow, green.
There
There
we
we go.
Oh, sorry. I know in the beginning we had some mix-ups with Yankee Ridge because the dual language, but it seems like it's gotten better. We've moved kids around just to make sure that we have enough room on the buses. And it seems like everyone adapted well. I know we have had a couple parent complaints. Well, they got to ride the bus last year, but they're 1.5 miles from the school, so that's the standard, the district standard, so. But besides that, I think it's done well, and I think it's helped the behavior on the buses. I really do.
Anyone?
I was actually going to ask what you thought the change is to have such a tremendous reduction. If there's anything in particular that is being done now or not being done that you think attributes to it, or?
I think they're listening now, and I have seen more suspensions this year off for riders due
Okay.
to the fact of the problems on the bus.
So like
and
the
I-
message being sent, you think
There's
is-
messages being sent home to the parents, so, yeah.
Okay.
And remember, the issues from Yankee Ridge, that 99% increase is, we're talking about a completely different
Right.
population of
On the
students.
school.
So the majority of the bus riders going over to Yankee Ridge last year were kids that were from the Dr. Williams neighborhood. And so now those students are walking to Dr. Williams, so they're not on a bus. And instead, most of the riders to Yankee Ridge now are our Latinx students from Ivanhoe and the
Liberty
mobile
Commons,
home
yeah.
communities,
Got it.
where we pick up a large number of students
Yes.
at one time. How many buses go to Ivanhoe? Is it 4 or 5? 4? 3?
Yes.
3.
There's 3.
So, yeah, so they pick up a huge number of the kids that go to those in just like 2 or 3 stops.
Right.
Which is great because that's a really short bus ride, yeah. We're able to pick them up and go right from here straight to the school.
School.
So there's less time, like Shawnee said, there's
To have
less time
problems.
on the bus to have problems.
Yeah.
Because you're not going all over the city like we were with some of the buses that were going and picking up Dr. Williams kids and kind of taking them all
Going
over
all
the
over.
place.
Yeah.
Just because I'm curious, what is the longest time a student is riding the bus?
An hour or less?
We can find out for you. We'll confirm that.
Our rule is an hour, so
Yes.
it should be an hour or less, like Shawnee said. If we hit that hour mark, then we're supposed to kind of try to do something else.
Anyone else? Great, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Our second administrative report this evening is our discipline improvement plan. So, Chastity?
So you have 3 things that Chastity's going to talk about. She has her slides, and then you also have the ISB template, And then you also have our student behavior response information that was in the packet. So you have 3 things that she's going to reference today.
All right. Good evening. Hello.
Hello.
You all seem real sleepy today because it's cold.
It's cold.
Well, hopefully I can bring you some excitement talking about disciplines, which is such a great topic. So tonight we are seeking board approval for our discipline plan that we have to turn into the state. So I'm going to just give some background, go through the work that we've done to create the plan, and then answer any questions that you all may have as well. So we are top 20% in the state for exclusionary practices. We have some last year, and these are things, let me just say this background. One, being identified as top 20% in the state, that comes directly from ISB. They send us that information based off of all the states and where they are and who the disproportionality in who is being expelled or suspended. So we're in the top 20%, and our disproportionality rank is 24, but it's more of a percentile rank. So that is a significant number too. So we'll continue to talk about that. Last year, there was also some inconsistencies in practices and consequences within and across buildings. And so then the Joint Student Discipline Committee got together. UEA was expressing some concerns about the safety and well-being of staff, students as well. Some of the behaviors not being followed through. And so there were lots of communications and meetings between UEA and district people to support the creation of what we have as a response continuum. So that's one of the handouts that you all got. This was completed maybe towards the end of last year, Dr. Ivy Tatum.
Yeah.
And so when I jumped in and came on board in July, myself, Dr. Wemel, and Beth Ladd, we presented to the administrators on this continuum, and then we also looked at the matrix, which identifies all of the behaviors that students could like get a referral for or suspended for. And we did some work with principals, deans, and then we've also met a few times this year, and then we had a team come together this year based on last year's data to make a plan for this year until basically this time next year. So that is how the term kind of runs. You get your data maybe in October for the previous year, and then you continue that plan. So we're expected, if this plan is approved, that we will run it from the approval date, which hopefully is tonight, up until like end of January, early February of next year. All right. So as you can see, this is since 2017 up until 2024. This tells you the disproportionality rate. So the amount of white students we have, the amount of white students who receive E or S, so expulsions or suspensions. Total students of color, the amount of expulsions and suspensions that they have. In yellow, the highlighted column tells the racial disproportionality rate. And the next column is, are we in the top 20%? So as you can see, we've been in the top 20% for a number of years. And then our ranking. So again, I want to point out that this is last year's data. So the things that we're doing this year, and even the decrease in some of the stuff we're seeing on the buses, and then I'll outline some areas of strengths based on this continuum. We are certainly hoping that next year, when we get this data, that it will be way less than 4.9. Right now, 4.9 is extremely high. And it talks about basically how our Black students are at such a significant risk for expulsion, suspension, or just exclusionary practices in general.
Just one quick question. When you say when it's like the 2024 school year, does that mean like the 23-24 school year? I'm assuming.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Thank you.
Any more questions about this chart? Okay. So some key points I kind of hit home as I've discussed this with deans, APs, leaders, is we haven't been this high since 2018. And so really revisiting and going back to some basics of what are we doing to address behaviors that is not exclusionary. This is just for our reference and knowledge. The chart at the bottom is what I was really referring to when I talked about the risk ratio value. So anything greater than 3 is like a yikes. And so we're at 4.9 right now. So this is why it is critical for us to be looking at what we're doing and how we're managing and supporting students, particularly Black students with behavior. And if we even looked at it further, our Black male students. So here, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. How do you figure the risk ratio?
So ISB does this. To be honest, I don't know the calculations that they use, but it is based off of like, let me go back. So they're looking at how many students that we have that are white who are receiving expulsions and or suspensions. Then they're comparing that in some type of calculation to the students of color that we have overall total in district and how they're receiving exclusionary practices. And so basically if we go to this slide, it's saying like our kids are at risk 4.9 times higher than a white student to get suspended or expelled.
Okay, so the risk ratio is the risk of being excluded.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
it
Yes.
wasn't that they were a student more at risk.
Oh, no. Thanks for that clarification.
And one
Their
other
risk-
question.
Mhm.
What is BIR?
Oh, for this is taken from ISB as well. This is their behavior incident referral. So we don't call it a BIR, but that's what they were meaning. All right. Oh,
No,
Who
I
had a
was gonna
question?
say, if you wanna compare, ours are ODR, or Office Discipline Referral. So that would be the similar reference point to what ISB calls a BIR. Okay, yep.
I know maybe we'll have a conversation about this at the end, but do they look at specific incidences, like what happened in the school or what the student did in order to determine whether or not it's appropriate or not for exclusions?
yes, I will say that based on some things, so even this first one, so thank you for bringing that up, there are now limits. So before, technically an administrator, say if an AP is over the deans at the high school, usually APs would consult with the principal to determine, oh, this student did this offense, we're gonna suspend for 3 or 4 days. So now we have limits where they have to get approval from either Dr. Ivy Tatum, Dr. Taylor, or if they have an IEP 504, Beth. So there's some approval conversations that need to happen to kind of help reduce that. Does this warrant a suspension? But also, does it need to be a 5-day suspension or a 2-day suspension? So I think they're having more conversations about what is the behavior and what is the consequence that the team is thinking based on a number of things. So I do think that the limits and or collaboration between district and the administrators too has been helpful to help guiding some, have we tried this?
One more quick question. Is there a distinction in these metrics between in-school suspensions and out-of-school suspensions?
Great question. I would say there is still in our internal work, there's still room for improvement. ISB does count exclusionary practices as being out of the school, so that would be when they're in like restorative in the RU classes in middle school or high school, that's in school. But anything like if they get sent home for 2 to 3 days, or if they're up for expulsion, that's those exclusionary practice that they're referring to. I do think that as a team, though, we are even still talking about time out of class, which is not necessarily sending you home, but we are sending them to another environment or space that is also impeding their learning, right, and instruction. So internally, we do have those discussions. All right, so the limits, this is just progress over time. And when I identify the strengths, opportunities, and weaknesses, these bullet points are coming from me talking to district administrators, APs, deans. I do meet monthly with whoever is in charge of discipline at the secondary levels, and we look at discipline data. We have conversations, talk about what are our next steps. And so this is just a combination of different colleagues sharing what they think is working, what are some opportunities we have, but also still some weaknesses that we need to work through. So one strength is being able to be creative with restorative practices, to get ideas from colleagues. So we do see more collaboration and conversations happening across buildings and even with supervisors or colleagues, because there are documents like the response continuum. It's like, how are you utilizing that in your space or your area? We had this offense, here's how we handle it. And then when we meet with them, we also try to put up real scenarios. So we will pull data from Skyward and say, this was the offense, here was the outcome. Let's talk about how you all would have handled that. What level do you think this was? And so we do try to engage them in conversations where they're looking at, this is real life data from our district, but maybe there are two different outcomes based on the school learning environment. Why is that, right? And so we try to bring that creativity, but also thought process to our meetings with them. Some schools, especially in secondary, have switched to, instead of saying you have 2 days out, they try to do the 1 day in, 1 day out to lessen the amount of time that kids are out of school. And we're really excited about the SEL adoption that we will have going forward and the implementation of that explicit teaching of those skills, because as we know, behavior is usually some sort of skill deficit, and until we kind of take that time to explicitly teach those skills and practice, our students will just get in a cycle of repeating those behaviors. And so as adults, we have to kind of take the realm and do better at explicitly teaching what we expect. Some of the weaknesses, we definitely have had less complaints from UEA, which is great. But there are some spaces that we recognize that need some systems to support this behavior continuum, but also supporting staff and students and families as well. We need consistent use of the continuum. So this is new this year. While people are like, yes, we go to this, we use it, we want to make sure that we have this embedded in many more spaces. Right now, we feel like our administrators, deans kind of utilize it, but also we want to make sure that teachers understand the continuum and what their expectations and responsibilities are with the classroom managed responses and potential interventions, and then making sure support staff as well have knowledge of the continuum. So right now, it's really at the level of, we have administrators using it, deans. If you're a PBIS universal tier person, you've seen this, some school improvement people, but we really want to make sure that it gets in the hands of more staff going into next year. Also, we, excuse me, need to support. So we have laid out, if you look at, what is it, page 3 and 4, there are level 1 classroom managed responses and interventions. And so specifically for that third column of interventions, we need to make sure that we are providing professional development to staff on what those interventions are and how they could be and should be utilized in the spaces with kids. Opportunities, we're definitely looking at how we can empower our SRS staff and get them trained in restorative practices. These are the people who are in the hallway, always seeing our kids, supporting them, who can encourage them to go to classroom, make good decisions. And so we're thinking about how we can empower them to also be champions for kids in those unstructured spaces, because that is when a lot of the behaviors happen. Another thing is sharing data on a regular is very important and critical. and we're trying to push schools to have their either the AP, the school improvement team, or the PBIS tier leader to share, here is our discipline data for the month. Here's where we got the most infractions or referrals. Maybe it's in disrespect. Let's talk about this as a school. What can we do? And so it's really about being transparent with the data, where we are, what students may be struggling, and how we're going to create a plan to get more investment from the kids. But I guess the biggest part of that is like being transparent to say, let's work on this as adults and as a community versus let's just give a disciplinary consequence to a student who keeps repeating. What are we doing to kind of stop those behaviors? Another thing that we've talked about too is having those conversations of support with educators as well. And so I would say new teachers sometimes are struggling to manage their classrooms. How are we having positive conversations with them to say, hey, I noticed that maybe you've written 30 referrals over the past month, and that may be significantly more than the building at large. What support do you need? How can I support you? And so we think even those powerful conversations and combining them with like walkthroughs or going in to specifically see behavior in the classroom or sense of belonging for students is really important too. Again, to increase the transparency, but most of all, to make an action plan to be able to support both the students and the adult. So I have to give my shout outs to all the team members who helped create this plan. As you can see, there was representation from elementary to high school. And it is not an easy thing to talk about discipline and data, but this team was really reflective and was very collaborative in helping create this plan. So shout out to our team who created the plan. It was a great meeting, and lots of good conversations were had that I think lots of times we don't have the opportunity to have those about discipline because we're just in the mix of it. So we had two objectives when that team came together. We needed to analyze and identify root causes of the disproportionality. That outcome was to develop the set of actionable steps, which we did, and you'll see. And then we wanted to develop and implement restorative and inclusive practices to reduce the exclusionary discipline. And so we also set some strategies and objectives to that as well that you will see. So this is the actual plan that we are submitted to ISB. There are 3 kind of strategies: a tier 1 strategy, tier 2 strategy, and tier 3 strategy that we will be implementing upon approval. And the first one is just really that tier 1. We have to ensure that everybody, everywhere in our schools is really using restorative practices and or positive behavioral interventions, our PBIS. So, of course, the more we promote that positive behavior, we can reduce discipline for all students, but specifically having that lens of how are our Black students, Black boys, feeling more included. How are we promoting a positive environment where they feel welcomed? And so as we go through each, ISB asked us to kind of outline the objective, who are the responsible individuals, success criteria, method of evaluation, and then who would be the district point person. And so you'll see that in each of our tiered strategies outlined. One thing that I want to share for the success criteria for this one, we have been in lots of conversations about, yes, we have PBIS, we've had restorative practices in the past. How do we really ensure that this is being implemented across the district? And so, of course, more professional development and training is something that we're talking about at the district level and in school improvement plans as well. We're adding a culture and climate goal to each school improvement plan for next year. And so those goals will have to align with this discipline improvement plan. So we're trying to bring more alignment and also making sure that classroom teachers or spaces have a classroom management plan. And that is something that the team was very adamant about, because whether you're doing restorative practices or PBIS, sometimes in spaces there is a lack of system or plan, school-wide or within particular classrooms, and that often exacerbates how we're writing referrals and how we move from referrals to suspensions very drastically. So we want to see a reduction in the number of referrals, suspensions, and expulsions. Increase, student engagement and positive behavior for referrals. So as you'll see this too at the end, we always end it with a celebrate students and staff. And so not only what are we doing to respond to discipline, but what are we doing when discipline, to respond to the things that are going well. And so we added that as a method of evaluation too. And we need to be able to adjust our plans for students based on groups or classes, right? And so if we have quarterly data reviews or monthly data reviews with a particular team, school, what are we doing to adjust the plan specific to that building to meet the needs of the students in the building, or the type of referrals or behaviors that we see most frequently. I think that's it on this one. That's the tier 1 strategy. As we get to tier 2, so tier 1, everybody is doing it. We're all invested. Tier 2 is more of that targeted, so SEL interventions. We have tier 2 meetings, MTSS meetings, some school call them. I've heard them called behavioral team meetings before, where you're specifically looking at student behavior or referrals for students to get into some type of SEIG group, social emotional learning group, or to receive some sort of intervention. So this is an area where we really want to focus on what are our district interventions and how are they working, when are we finding time to implement them, and how are we progress monitoring them. So we know that tier 1 all is not going to work for every kid, but once we identify by some decision rules, and so you'll see that through here too, meaning a kid may pop up if they have like 10 or more referrals, right? They should be in Panorama, they'll be identified as at risk or critical. How are we using that list to then target some SEL interventions for those at-risk group of kids? And so this is an area we want to, again, solidify what interventions work for our students, provide some professional development on them, and begin to implement them consistently and track progress of students in order to decrease suspensions, referrals, expulsions. Okay. And then the tier 3 strategy is like the most restrictive, right? We're looking at this student, tier 1 didn't work. Maybe they had some tier 2 interventions that also didn't work. Now we need like an individualized plan for this student. And so if they had an IEP, this might be like a BIP, behavior intervention plan. But students who may not have an IEP still need some type of behavior intervention plan. It's not as formal as a BIP, but it is something that the tier 2, tier 3 team might implement and assign like a counselor, social worker, or maybe a case manager to give that student the intensive explicit teaching. So maybe at tier 2, they got 20 minutes a week. Maybe at tier 3, they're getting like double that, 40 minutes a week, one-on-one, working on some explicit skill for a duration of maybe 4 to 6 weeks to see if that student can learn and hone in that skill to be able to not do that same behavior again. So this is just more of a intensive way to support students who are having issues. But again, all of this is for us adults to implement before we go straight to expulsion, because we do have spaces where students may do some behavior and we haven't intervened any, and then they are suspended, right? So we have to figure out what is the in between and what we're doing to support students when we know they're struggling, and not just going from A to Z. So some of the next steps are to get board approval, then fully implement the plan. The plan strategies will show up in school improvement plans that they'll start creating for next year, actually next month. So we're starting a lot of our school improvement planning for next year, next month. So we will have some PD outlines before the end of summer. They'll have their school improvement plans for the next year before the end of summer. And so when we see the discipline improvement plan and adding that culture goal to our school improvement plans, it will have to align with one of those. So for instance, if your group, if you're a school that has high disproportionality rates or suspension rates, then you might be really looking at, okay, at tier 2, we need to do these things better. So we're going to focus on these set of interventions. So when we have professional development at our school, we're going to be talking about behavior plans, SEL strategies, how we're utilizing them in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And so they will kind of narrow the focus of how they'll implement some of those broader strategies into their school improvement plan. And then that team, this team who came together to create this, along with others, will continue to get the PD and the, I think of it just like a group think tank, right? They like to come together to talk about discipline because they have colleagues to engage and talk about scenarios and how they would respond. So I think it is bringing more cohesion, getting those groups together to really talk about what are we doing. Are our practices equitable? How can we improve some of the outcomes for our students? That's all I have.
Board members, any questions? No, it's on the agenda.
Do you feel like you have the, like, sufficient resources for the plan that's in place, or that you're trying to?
I think we're trying, so when you say resources, I think of it like we do need to have set professional development time. So we're even thinking about like the staff meetings, the Monday structures, how they will give time to do some of this work for rolling out for next year. I think time is always a resource we don't have enough of. Restorative practices, I'll just name that. That is very intensive and can take a long time to get people trained. So it just takes us to be proactive on our part in how we're planning. And that's another reason that our school improvement plans will be due before the end of summer, because then at district office, it's our job to say, okay, here are everybody's priorities. How are we giving intentional PD to principals? Then what are our PD over the summer we're offering, professional development at the beginning of the school year. So I think that we're trying to be intentional with timelines so that we can provide those resources.
Anyone else?
I have a question. Just basically want to know, because it's with the black boys that the problems are kind of consistent with, do you feel like there's enough staff that the boys can kind of relate to in the buildings? I mean, I know it's a teacher shortage and all that, but I just wanted to know what you thought about that.
Oh, that's a loaded question, Lola. We'll be here till 9 o'clock. I think that there's a potential. I think from my experience, so I work with Manifest as a middle school group. The Self-Made Kings come over after school sometimes to help with Manifest. And so there are ways that we're doing some mentoring to target black boys and black girls particularly. But I think that they just want to authentically be themselves. And I don't think that they feel that they can in a lot of spaces. And so, do we as adults have the capacity to do that? Yes, but I think it's a growth mindset. We have to do some shifting in our own thinking and practices. And we just have to be champion for kids, no matter how they show up, right? And so, I think we need to identify some of our triggers as adults and why those are triggers, and how is that keeping our students from being themselves and comfortable, and that relationship piece. So I don't know if I answered it, but I tried. Thank you.
I'm trying to picture the practices that you're talking about. And back in the old days, when we talked about a behavior plan, like kid would have a little checklist on the desk and the teacher would say, oh, you're really, you know, you check in at certain times, you're really being good right now, or, oh, why, you know. Are you talking about that kind of thing again?
So I can go quick examples of each. So tier 1, so if it was restorative practices, right, I would say as a teacher, because this is tier 1, in my classroom, we would talk about community. We would talk about if someone offended someone in our community, what do? We have a restorative circle, right? We try to fix the situation within the community, versus you did this, now you're an outcast of our community. Because when we expel or we give time away, that makes students feel alienated. So this is more about like teachers really being the champions for that community that they're building in their classroom, and then the school community, of course, to say this is how we handle behavior. We might have a restorative conversation, meaning you hurt somebody, I brought them over, they want to tell you how you impacted them. I want you to listen. I want you to be able to understand their perspective, and then we make an agreement to move forward, or maybe we need more time. So I think a big part of restorative practices, it does take time for us to listen, for us to give people time to cool off, just natural things that we do in everyday life. But sometimes because we have so much to condense in a school day, we don't take the time to do that. And so that would be like a tier 1 strategy. Now, same situation. Let's say the kid then kept, I don't know, hitting another student, right? And so I would say, man, this student is really missing the SEL skill of maybe emotional self-regulation. And so I would say I need to meet with that student. I could be a teacher, I could be a co-teacher, whoever is determined to meet with that student to really explicitly talk about that skill of emotional regulation, but also putting it into context. So, you know, those 2 days when you hit so-and-so, what was going on in your body? And I'm really teaching them their own triggers, what's making them feel that way. And then we do this over a stint of time. But I'm also looking for those opportunities when I do see that student enacting this SEL strategy of emotional regulation, so that I can celebrate that and get them to notice when they're doing it. Or if they're not doing it, we're bringing it to a teachable moment. Like, remember when you were supposed to do this? Now you tell me what coping skills you're supposed to use. And so this is a little bit more targeted and explicit in teaching, giving feedback, and taking some type of data on how the student is performing. Then like the highest level would be, okay, you need a separate behavior intervention plan, that it might be your full day on a sheet, and we talk about specific in this class. You will, for some students, that might be somewhat of a checklist. You will, you know, keep your hands to yourself. What does that look like? I'm just thinking elementary. What does that look like? Pictures of that. When you're calm, here's how you look. And that student being able to see that visual, but there's much more like check-in, progress. You might take a chunk of the morning, then meet with the student, and then go into the afternoon. So it's much more intensive in frequency and duration, and those targeted skills, but not more than usually 2 or 3 skills at a time, because then that just becomes overwhelming. Does that make sense for you? Hopefully.
Yeah, so those check-in times that I was talking about, you're looking at that as a tier 3.
Yes,
sort
because
of
it's
like.
more intentional. So I guess what I didn't say, there's explicit teaching with that too. So any, let's just say if it was a chart, any skills that I'm putting on that chart, I've explicitly taught you those skills, or we're in process of teaching you those skills as well.
Or the social worker could have done that. Okay, okay. This was a really, between the last school board meeting and this meeting, this was a really difficult time for me. We did a very, what I thought everybody felt was a very difficult expulsion. And then there was news of a student getting hurt in the school. I've wondered if we have thought about looking at someone like the child that, and at 14, I think that person is a child. If we have ever looked at doing a deep dive into what has happened in the school with that child and seeing where we could have improved, or I will say I thought the parent seemed very, I don't know her, I don't know the child, seemed very reasonable, you know, at the meeting. But I think that, you know, it would obviously be very private, and I'm not saying you would have to tell everybody everything, but I really think we need to know better what's happening with these children before we get to that point. And part of the reason I'm thinking about that is because this little person, and I don't know if it's a boy or a girl, got hurt and was moved to a different school. But all of the children who saw that person get hurt were probably traumatized by that, by seeing that. And how often are the kids who are not being hit and are not doing the hitting, but are watching the hitting, how often are they being traumatized? And what is our responsibility in that? And do we need some sort of alternative, even if it's a week, you know, place where a child could go, where we're not expelling them, we're not excluding them at some sort of alternative school. But I worry because of if the child, let's just say, you know, child X doesn't have a great life, home life either. I mean, I don't know why children are traumatized with every child is different. But maybe this child X is holding it together better than child Y. But every time that, if a child is in fear of being hit at school, that is a little more trauma every day. So how long will child Y then be able to hold it together? And are we intensifying our own problems? And I really think I'd like somehow to be a study of what we're doing, how it's affecting kids, particularly the ones that are having the difficulties. You know, should we have acted sooner? Should we have done something different? I found that meeting very difficult. I found reading the board stuff this week about a child being hurt very difficult. And I would like to suggest that we look at that. I think that the continuum is a good idea.
So-
And your description of the practices that you would like to institute, I think that's a good idea. But I think we need more, because I'm worried about the kids.
So at the tier 3 level that Chastity was talking about is where a lot of those conversations do happen. So we can, she mentioned Panorama Student Success, so we can go in and create like a behavior intervention plan for a student. Sherry asked me a question via email and said, now that everyone's using Panorama more, is this where we'll be able to see more of those interventions being used before students get to us at the meetings that are really hard for board members to have to sit through? And the answer to that is yes. Panorama is designed for us to be able to create individual plans. When we see a student who is getting frequent referrals, who is having, showing more aggressive behavior, who we've tried all the things that the core teaching is not working for them. And then we layered on the tier 2 things like the check-in, the check-out, the social academic groups, some of the small group things at tier 2 aren't working. And now here we are at tier 3, and we need more. So that student is getting the core, they're getting the extra things at tier 2, like check in, check out, the small groups. And now we say, okay, that's still not enough. Now we need to look at, they need something just individualized that's just for them. So we do have the ability to do that in Panorama. We can write we can bring the team together, which is our problem-solving team, the MTSS, the multi-tiered system of support team, comes together and really sits down, and like it kind of is like those old school wraparound days where we would sit down and talk about what does this student need that we're not providing them. At the top of this tier 3 thing, it says, on this page, it says behavior intervention plan. So some of these are done with an IEP, but a lot of these are done sometimes with students that don't have an IEP. And it isn't part of an IEP program. It's just something that student needs that is more intensive and one-on-one. And I think the objective that Chastity has written there is exactly what our plan is, to do more of those. We've had Panorama for a couple years, but we really had not given people the intensive training to use it. This year, we've made it an expectation that everyone is using it, that we're using it for attendance intervention plans, we're using it for behavior plans. It is a really great tool. So next year, the expectation is we're using it to do just what you're talking about at a very individualized level for all students. So,
And I would say to talk about the students who may be observing or see some type of incidents.
yeah.
That's where you come back to the community, right? And so as a previous principal, if something big happened, I would be calling a community meeting. And so we talk about it. You give kids spaces to share their feelings. That could be in the classroom. It could be by grade level. And so I feel like, too, that part of it is that community responding to there was hurt in our community or something happened, and we need to process our thoughts and feelings about that so that we can continue to be a safer community. And I agree with you, too. Expulsions are not easy. They never feel good. But I think if we said we are consistently doing this at tier 1, we do this at tier 2, we've seen that these things are not working for a student, that to me is more evidence of, okay, we've tried these supports. It never feels good when you have a student being suspended or or up for expulsion when we haven't intervened. Like, to your point, where was the history of us intervening before that student got there? That would be my biggest question as we bring up expulsions or even some suspensions, because some suspensions are, again, you did the behavior and it went straight to level 4, right? So level 4, a suspension is supposed to be like a level 3 or 4 response, but sometimes it's our level 1. And so I agree, creating some expectations, systems, and saying that these are what we do as a district across the tier 1, 2, and 3, and that's the expectation to see that, so we can build in Panorama a student profile that really speaks to what that student is capable of, their strengths, their weaknesses, but also how we've had tried to support them in many ways. And if the support didn't work, did we try something else?
There's a big difference between elementary and middle school and high school students. I think that, if we see things like at the high school that come to us, and then we notice, and I think this is what you're talking about, we're noticing that kids aren't in school, or they're tardy all the time, or they're in school but they're not attending classes. Those are some of the things that you can intervene at those lower levels, and hopefully, so it won't get to a bigger incident. So I can see that you have to do different things based on the level of the student.
Yeah, and that's why I added referrals. We chose to add referrals to all of these because elementary school, while they might not be suspending at a rate of a middle school or high school, those referrals add up. They tell a story, right? This student is struggling with XYZ behaviors. So how do we know that in order to intervene so that when they do get to middle school, we have some sort of data on this student, what has been tried, what's worked, and what hasn't.
Isn't there a new SEL curriculum that you're going to be starting to? I mean, they have something now, and I think it's really great to include that in the curriculum, because then they can see the effects of some of their behavior on other people as far as the students.
Yeah, we haven't adopted it yet, so they're still piloting the 3, and we will be coming end of March, early April with the recommendation.
So there'll be tools to talk about who my classroom is really struggling with social awareness. Let me pull a lesson, a mini lesson, or some extra practice or scenarios for my students because they need to struggle. So you'll see that in advisory at the middle school level, high school. I think there's still talk of when and where that's happening, but integrating that explicit teaching of some of the skills that we expect students to know is really important.
And I wasn't speaking against what you've done here. I'm just, I really think that this is a good plan. But, and I would look at the stuff in Panorama as being data and good data. I mean, I'm not discounting that. But I would like to see someone take a couple of students, talk to their first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth grade teachers and say, where was this kid? What happened? And see what we learn from that. And I know it would take time, but I kind of think it would be worth the time. I think that some of us felt at this last expulsion that maybe we were surprised at how many things had gone on that kind of were just ignored. Not ignored exactly, but and out of good hearts. I'm not saying anybody did anything bad. I think everybody who probably interacted with this student was a good person and was trying to do the best by him. But we have to figure out what we're doing on a human level for these very human students. And just thought I'd mention it.
Yeah, and I think we all have stake in that too, right? So the board might decide, or you all might think of, how are you using this racial disproportionality plan to have discussions about expulsions, right? To layer a lens of, we know who is coming to us, usually black males being receiving expulsion. So how are we changing the questions, the criteria, the things that we're doing to support this family or the schools to be able to do so?
Tori,
I was just gonna chime in since the expulsion stuff was brought up kind of in a bit of a context as if we don't have a complete picture of kids. I'd like to totally disagree with that. Obviously, we don't have a kid's full life story. We can only take what they give us, and sometimes they don't give us very much. In other situations, we get a lot. But what we do as a board we do have an expectation that there has been a lot of interventions before we get to that point. And in fact, there have been a couple instances a while back where those were sent back as an absolute, no, we're not going to expel because there weren't enough efforts put in place. So I don't want people to think that, we're here expelling kids and we don't even have a complete picture or there have not been enough interventions, because that is absolutely not correct. I think, expulsions are hard for all of us board members. I mean, I've been in an expulsion in tears, and I'm not a person that easily cries. So, but I also recognize as a board member and will state publicly that sometimes the traditional school setting does not work for our Black boys, and that's just a reality for some of them. And some of them recognize that in the expulsion hearing or before the expulsion hearing, that, this is just not working for me. And I need a different type of environment. I need a different type of setting. I can't make it through a full school day. And sometimes we've had some really good success, unfortunately, expelling them from the traditional school day. But they did find boys actually started with the girls. And so teaching them, some of those triggers as well. But I just wanted to make sure that there was not any, any public perception that we're just expelling people and we don't.
Well,
We've
no,
not
I'm gonna
made
make a
a lot of
statement here,
efforts.
because it's not only like good practice, it is state law that we as a board determine if the district has missed any interventions that it could have done. And if that answer is yes, we do not expel. We follow the law,
Right.
and we don't expel kids where we have missed points where we could have intervened in a way that would have prevented the behavior.
And we've certainly said no. I mean, just put that out there. We don't expel everyone that comes before us, so.
And I agree with that, the few that I've done, that there have been interventions, and there have been multiple interventions.
I think we just have to be careful with how we say that, because what you just said right now is a different perception from what you started off saying. So that's why I'm speaking
Okay.
up to say this is,
Okay. What, yeah, okay.
That's why also I think that the plan is excellent, because a lot of times we don't have the data as far as, okay, you did a check-in. Well, how long was the check-in? How many times did you meet? Who did the check-in? Was it the same? What were the results? So I think that we want that data just to be assured. But our number one responsibility is that it's a safe environment for all education, for all students.
Right.
And if there's a situation where it won't be safe, we have to, that's the number one priority as well. So.
All right, now, circling back to the plan, which is on our agenda tonight, later on for a vote. Just, I guess, as a point going forward, the board typically does with anything that's before for a vote, we typically like to discuss at one meeting
Yeah.
and vote on it later. I understand that, this needs to be submitted to the state by,
Yeah. We're behind.
we're
the
a bit
deadline.
behind, so that's why it's up for a vote
Yes.
tonight, in case the public's wondering why we're talking about it and voting the same night.
Yes.
I don't really have an issue at all with the plan. What I thought was interesting, though, is that your PowerPoint presentation provided context and information I couldn't quite, pull out of the form you got to file with the state. Is the state going to get both of them together, or just what's here in this?
I could give them both. The state usually just is like, give us that.
Okay.
I
But-
think that we would do ourselves justice and put another stamp on our commitment by giving both. I don't know if they'll read
Anyway.
it, but
Well, anyway, I found it.
Yeah.
I read this and I couldn't quite get
Yeah.
it, but reading your PowerPoint made things a lot more clear. So thank you for both. Anyone else?
Yes, we are behind. We should have done this at an earlier meeting, and we didn't have access to all the information we needed from ISB to be able to do that. And so we do need to get it submitted as soon as possible, which is, thank you, Paul, I was going to say that earlier, which is why it is on the agenda for tonight. So that doesn't mean, though, that if we receive feedback from people or if we have questions or comments, like, we can insert things in. We just needed to document that we had the meeting with the board and that the board has seen and approved our general plan moving forward. But if we received feedback, we could most definitely insert things in for our practice, moving forward, if we get feedback from stakeholders or if you get feedback from your folks.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you so much, Cassidy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to our action items. First up is our consent agenda. 10.1 are our minutes from the January 21st business meeting, the February 4th study session, the February 6th special meeting, and the February 10th special meeting. 10.2 are bills and checks, education fund bills for $1,053,000, O&M fund bills for $233,000, bond and interest fund bills for $278.98. Transportation fund bills for $283,000, working cash bonds for $1.2 million, school facility occupancy tax for $115,000, tort for $19,000, payroll, salary, and benefits for $4.6 million, Urbana adult education for $99,000. There's a list of personnel items that were in our packet that are requested to be approved. That's 10.3, 10.4 are administrative personnel items that are also being requested, again, in our packet. And 10.5 is a resolution authorizing and directing the sale or disposal of personal property in accordance with state law. These items are microwave, two-drawer file cabinet, broken chairs, broken tables, desk chairs, various parts like belts, gaskets, pumps, etc. Does anybody wish to remove any of the items on the consent agenda to an individual action item? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the entire consent agenda.
I move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further comments or discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Jones?
Yes.
Member Hickson?
Yes.
Member Baxley?
Yes.
Member Langendorf, yes. Vice President Exum?
Yes.
President Pulowski?
Yes, motion passes. Our individual action items follow. First up are our gifts. The Village Investment Promise, Urbana School District 116's Black Parent Group, received the following donations: $100 from Larry Lister, $500 from Altrusa, Thank You International, and Lone Star Lodge number 18. This group sponsors services projects each year, 60 backpacks for UMS students. The group was a vision of the late Janice Mitchell, who lived by the proverb, "It takes a village to raise a child." From James Wang, Peoria Chartered Urbana provided a bus and driver for a field trip to Chicago for a class at Thomas Paine Elementary. Urbana High School boys basketball program received the following donations: Gwendolyn Joseph Powell for $100 and Miles Owens for $100. Ray Spooner of Urbana donated $3,478 for a New Orleans trip to Urbana High School. Jeffrey Scanlon donated a trumpet to the Urbana High School band program, and Jake Hogan from Champaign donated a trumpet to the Urbana High School band program. Is there a motion to accept the gifts and send out thank yous?
I move to accept and send thank yous.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 12.2 is our district calendar for 2025-2026. So I guess the chair would entertain a motion from the floor, and we'll go from there.
I move for approval of the 2025-2026 district calendar.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I guess now is be time for discussion.
Yeah, this is a very difficult decision for me. I've looked at all sides, and I was part of the calendar committee, and the process itself was a terrific process, where people were free to suggest ideas, talk about concerns in a very open manner, and was accepted. Their ideas were accepted and listened to very well. I really enjoyed being part of the process. That being said, I still have my concerns about it, especially, as I mentioned before, that we want to be inclusive of all groups of people, and also the fact, which is heavily on me, that Champaign is providing a day off. And if we want to add additional religious days, I mean, that is something that we have to think about and consider, but we shouldn't be in a situation where we say, well, let's not do it this year because one religion, their holiday's on a weekend and the other one isn't, because it could happen flip-flop any year like that. I've really given this a lot of consideration. I don't think I will support it. I won't support it. I was just thinking this afternoon about something that was said at my husband's funeral 3 years ago. His brother said, Michael didn't always do the right thing, but he always did the right thing. And I never got that until today when I was trying to decide. And that kind of hit me, that I think this is the right thing to do, is to be inclusive. So that's all I have to say.
So the procedure would be is if you wish to amend the calendar to change it in any fashion, would be to either request a friendly motion to amend from the motion maker and the second, or to vote no and then make a second motion later on. So.
Yeah, I'd like to keep the proposal the way it is, and then go from there and see what we have.
Okay.
I think that's only fair.
All right. Anyone else?
I agree with Sherry. I think that we should be more inclusive of everybody, and that it would be much fairer in that we say, okay, let's just say because I wouldn't know, there are two holidays that I've always called the high holidays. I don't know, I'm not Jewish, so I don't know which one is higher than the other one. But let's just say it's Yom Kippur, I'm guessing, I don't know. You know, every year we would have Yom Kippur off. But you would ask the Jewish community, you know, of these 2 days, which is which one do you want off? And that should be off. I think we're getting a sizable number of Muslim students, and I think that, and again, you'd have to ask that community, but, you know, maybe the Eid that follows Ramadan, you know, and if, per chance, one of those holidays fell on spring break, or well, it wouldn't with Yom Kippur, but, you know, a different, I mean, yeah. But then you wouldn't get another day off because of that, you know. But I think that allowing families to celebrate their religious, cultural get-togethers, their traditions, should be something that is important to all of us, and we make some adjustments to our lives in order to do that.
Sherry, do you think there was good representation of the different religions and ethnicities on the committee?
I don't know. I don't know. No one identified themselves as what they were, what they believed, which would made it nice because we're all looking at it from the same framework. I think I was obviously there to give a different perspective because of experiences that I've had in the district, even recent experiences. So I don't know that, but I think that everyone was concerned about all the representation. I mean, this is what they wanted to hear that.
Anyone else? Okay, roll call votes in order.
Okay, gonna go up the list. Member Hickson,
No.
Member Baxley,
Yes.
Member Langendorf, no. Vice President Exum,
Yes.
President Pulowski,
No.
and Member Jones.
Yes.
3-3 does not pass. So we can either make another motion, or we could defer this action item for another week.
I'd like to make a motion to consider, that the committee would consider one of the three other alternatives that they had. There were three that came up on how to include it, how to include it in the calendar. And they were divided amongst those three, but if they could come up with consensus, that would be great. I would like to send it back to the committee.
That would not require a vote, but we can just, well, how does the rest of the board feel about that?
When do we have, is there a certain timeline we have to get this out, or?
Well, it's
Uh,
almost
uh,
March, so
Okay.
we need a calendar for next year.
How, I mean,
Um,
how
but
long would it take to get the?
I can just do that via email. I mean, we had three choices. One was start the school year earlier, use the December 22nd day as at the end of the year, at the end of the first semester as a remote work day for staff. And then the third one was, I am drawing a blank.
Did it have to do with the first day of vacation?
That was, no, that was the one I just said, starting the year earlier, and
It was in the
I
last
can't
packet.
remember
I
what
could,
the third one was. No, it wasn't going, that was,
well,
very
it's
heavily
kind of,
not.
it's kind of moot. How long, I mean, could
we
we,
just need to choose one
could
of
we,
those.
yeah, basically get all those in front of the committee and get an answer back before the next meeting?
I
next
can do
board?
it via email. I don't know that I'll get that group. I mean, it's a pretty big group of people to get
Correct.
back
I
in
mean,
2 weeks, but I can do that via
Sherry, would
email.
would an email poll be sufficient, or
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the difference between the members who wanted to have the calendar as is or to change it was a difference of one person. It was like a majority, but it,
Sure.
you know, there's sometimes you just don't go with the majority when it's just
Yes.
one person. I mean, so I think that would be fine.
Yep.
okay, so that, I guess we'll expect this on our next agenda.
Okey-doke.
And you know, Lolly might be here too, so she could weigh in on the decision.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thank you. I lost my agenda. Here it is. Right, 11.3 is our district discipline improvement plan, which was presented for us this evening. Is there a motion for the floor?
I move for approval.
Second?
Then moved and seconded. Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Member Baxley,
Yes.
Member Langendorf, yes. Vice President Exum,
Yes.
President Pulowski,
Yes.
Member Jones,
Yes.
and Member Hickson.
Yes.
Motion passes. There is a call for a future special meeting Thursday at 6 p.m. at Anita Purvis. This will be an open meeting as part of our training for the targeted designation. Superintendent's report.
Okay, John has that. So, as you hopefully have seen, we have been sharing out our first public engagement around strategic planning. So our first survey is out and open until Friday, February 28th. I wanted to bring the board's attention to one, we're kind of branding the strategic planning in lots of different ways. We have, at your seat, you have like a, I wouldn't call it a book, like a little card that has the QR code on there for this first engagement. We've been passing out bookmarks at all the events that we go to. I have like little cards that I've just kept a stack with me, so any event that I go to, I've been passing these out. So they were everywhere during NAPID and any event that we've had since then. I also wanted to give the board just a short little update, and you have a one-pager document at your spot that I shared that just gives you a little more information about some of the additional strategic planning in addition to this survey, and then we'll have another one at the end of March during student-led conferences. But we also are planning to go out and do some very small group engagements. So I was supposed to do the first one on February 12th with these Special Education Advisory Council, but we had to cancel. That was the bad weather night, so a lot of things were canceled that evening. So I will find another way to engage with that group. I was really looking forward to, Beth had kind of advertised that I was going to be there, so I was disappointed that I was not able to engage with that group, but we know that is a really important group of families, so we definitely want to make sure We get input from some of our special education parents that are really active in the district. So I will also be joining the UEA monthly members meeting on Wednesday this week. I have already scheduled to join both of the BPAC meetings to talk about the plan. And then the ones that are TBD here is I'm really wanting to go out into some of the neighborhoods for families that, or just some of our larger groups. We specifically talked this evening about some of our Black students, but also our Latinx students as well. So this is kind of going out to those neighborhoods. I plan to like bring food and just kind of sit and listen, and at the same time give them an opportunity to share some things about the district and how we're doing and what we could do better. So when I go to these smaller engagements, I am going to be taking a different QR code for people who might be interested in being on the actual 2-day strategic planning dates, which are happening on April 16th and 17th. We have a strategic planning interest form. So for those smaller group settings where I can explain a little bit more about what we're going to be doing, we'll be able to invite people who are at those spaces to participate on April 16th and 17th. And then in March, we are going to go out using the information that we get from this first engagement. We're really getting some themes around areas that are strengths, but we're also getting good data around areas that our stakeholders feel like we could improve. So we're hearing from parents. I think because we've been able to go to a lot of spaces where we're kind of going to them instead of just sending out the link, we're actually going to spaces and asking people to fill out the survey. I think that's been helpful. But we'll take all that data out of this first engagement. We'll look at themes and patterns and then go into our neighborhoods via some of our elementary schools and have listening sessions. So this would also be a night where we would provide a meal, some kind of food option for families. And so the first part of it would be come and eat and just enjoy. And then we'd break off into groups and go into like the gym or multi-purpose room and break up into groups and just kind of rotate through some listening sessions around the different themes. So if you haven't done the survey yet, you'll know that some of the themes are facilities. We definitely are looking to one big artifact or out of the strategic plan in the next 5 years is a full-scale district facility plan. So that would be one of our goals, but also family engagement is an area that we're getting a lot of feedback on. Student engagement, of course, student achievement is something that we're all concerned about. So those are some of the big themes. Those are some of the questions that we asked. We have another group that is meeting. We have about 40 people that are part of a Portrait of a Graduate design team that have been meeting at the high school to talk about the skills and competencies that we are wanting to design an implementation plan starting from kindergarten through 12th grade, that these are the skills that life skills, 21st century skills, social skills, those durable skills that we want to make sure our UHS graduates leave us with, but also the skills that we know going into college, a career, or into the workforce. These are the skills that employers are looking for. So that group is also kind of meeting now, and that information will be able to be shared with the April 16th, 17th group, but also going out into those community meetings. I really hope to share the work of the Portrait of a Graduate team wherever we are in that process. So there are a lot of opportunities to engage upcoming. As soon as we're able to, it's been really hard to get the neighborhood spaces to finalize a date for us. One or two of them are pretty particular and won't let us come unless we're with a resident who lives there. And so it has been working with the housing authority on one or two of these has been a challenge as well. So I'm hoping in the next, by the end of this week, that we have all these March dates filled in. The schools have sent me dates for the elementary session, so we will have those filled in here pretty soon. And then we can advertise those more widely so people can kind of pick a day that they want to go to one of the listening sessions. And then people can let us know when you're there if you want to be part of the team. We can't take everybody, of course. Right now, I think we're hoping to have at least 50 people, 50 to 60 on the 16th and 17th. And we want that to be a representative group where we have families from early childhood all the way through high school. I've been loving going to the early childhood spaces and saying to them, you guys have to complete the survey. You're going to be with us for the next 12 years. So we need to know your thoughts. Well, they're going to be with us longer than 12 years. We need to know your thoughts. And so they've been really excited about being asked to be part of it. I don't think we intentionally go down to the pre-K space enough to get their input. And so being able to talk to so many early childhood parents in the last couple weeks has been really encouraging. So that was just kind of an update. When these dates are filled in, I will share it back with the board, and then we'll put it on our website and someplace where people can really see the upcoming, especially the community listening sessions. The small group sessions are really geared toward those specific communities because we really want to have them have a space that is intentional just for them. So we'll make sure that we hit all the other neighborhoods though, so everybody's represented. But questions or comments? Okay, so once this is completed, we'll reshare it back out. So is this the next slide, John? Okay, yes. So we have 3 state qualifiers in wrestling. Isn't that exciting? So Emiliano Bedola competes Thursday. And remember, we're here at State Farm. So the wrestling state qualifying tournament is back in Champaign, so which is great for us. So Emilio is on there. Ricky Ivy is our other male contender. And then we have Lily, one of our females. We had several who made it to sectionals, but Lily is the only one who made it to state. So Lily will compete and Ricky on February 28th and March 1st at the Ice Arena in Bloomington. So yeah, we're excited. That's exciting for our wrestling program. Winter Guard, we are always singing their praises. They just represent us so well everywhere they go. So their state finals were on Saturday, and the lyrical flag routine finished 4th in the state, and they earned the team's highest score at a state final in program history. In addition, 3 team members were named Scholar Athletes: Chloe Rogers, Denila Nash, and Quinn Lyon. So congratulations to Winter Guard. And then we've linked the performance. So their coach, Miss Christy, there in the middle, sent us a video. So you can watch the video if you like. So next, 6th grade center orientation. So someone mentioned that tonight. Oh, Marianne did in her presentation. We were talking about the Learn to Ride sessions that we'll have with MTD. So the week of March 10th, the 6th grade administrators and some of our AVID folks will be going to the 5th grade classrooms. But the week before that, we're going to have an orientation. Parents will get to hear about elective options. They'll hear more about the daily schedule. What does it mean to be an AVID school-wide building? And then the week after that, the administrators will go to the schools and actually talk to the 5th graders. We usually have an elective form that they fill out, and so we want to talk to their parents first and say, hey, here are all the elective options that they have. And then when we go to the form, we'll have a counselor that goes with us. Ms. Carr will be there, the new administrator. And by then, we may even have the assistant principal hired, and that person might be able to go as well to the classrooms to meet the students. So we're excited about that. But on the March 6th night, Marianne already mentioned that we'll have representatives from MTD, Quest, and First Student available. They won't be presenting, but they'll just be there to answer questions. They'll have information out for families to see. Unfortunately, the building is not open, so we will have to have that this year at the middle school, but we'll make sure that we have lots of pictures and hopefully some inside little shots of the progress so far. They've made a lot of progress. They are on target. The weather has really worked out really well, that they've been able to stay on track for their construction schedule. And so we will show some of that to families, and I think that's it about that. Urbana School Health Center, beginning March 3rd, we have counseling services back. So we used to have a full-time counselor at the school-based health center, and it has been really hard to rehire that position, but that position has been rehired. They also are going to be able to provide some substance abuse services for patients 5 and older. And remember, you do not have to be an Urbana student to receive services, but if you are an Urbana student, they're located right at the high school and very conveniently located, especially for our middle schoolers and high schoolers. And upcoming dates, so lots of things happening. The play starts, the next winter play is this weekend. Oh, I knew somebody was going to ask me that. I'll look. I will have to look because I can't remember off the top of my head. There's a band festival, choir festival. Yankee Ridge Multilingual is having their Black History Month celebration on the 26th. We've got an orchestra festival. The Polar Plunge for our students, the Cool Schools Polar Plunge is happening. And the survey, our last survey date for the first engagement is February 28th. That is it.
All right, thank you. We do have FOIAs that were completed and fulfilled that are published in our public agenda. At this time, the chair would entertain, after a 10-minute recess to reset the room, a motion to enter the executive session for the for litigation and for personnel as published again publicly in our agenda. Oh, and there's no action after our executive session. Thank you. Is there a motion from the floor?
Second.
Is that moved and seconded? Roll call, please.
Okay. Member Jones?
Yes.
Member Hickson?
Yes.
Member Langendorf, yes. Vice President Exum? Yes. President Pulaski?
Yes.
Member Baxley?
Yes.
After a 10-minute recess, we'll be in closed session.